Dumbest after dinner speaker you've ever had. And I come to that knowledge pretty securely. I'll tell you a few quick stories about myself just to give you a little understanding about my background. I grew up in Campbellsville, Kentucky, on the other side of the Ohio, and I grew up on a tobacco farm. So I got to learn how to do a lot of stuff very poorly, including most anything that had to do with wiring, electricity, most anything that had to do with work at all. I was pretty poor at it. We moved to Louisville back in '94. My wife decided that she wanted me to put floodlights on the back of our house. Now, how many guys in here are good at working electricity? Yeah, pretty good, yeah. I understand. I'm not. So, being a man, and I have this task from my bride, I set out that I'm going to wire my back porch with lights and a ceiling fan. Never done it before. Saw my dad do it, so I figured it can't be that hard. So I take a day off from work at WHAS, and I start first thing in the morning, and I finally get the last bit of wiring done at about midnight. I proudly announce to my bride, "Go down and flip the switch on, honey. I think I've got it done." She goes down there and hits that light. Not a dang thing happened, and I worked on that literally all day and most of the night. So I thought, well, I must have just missed a wire somewhere. So now I go right back to where I started, and I painstakingly go through every inch of that wiring to see where I made a mistake. I still can't find the problem. So I tell my wife, I said, look, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm supposed to meet the pastor for golf in the morning. I'm just going to have to go to bed, and I'll get up in the morning, and I'll do golf, and I'll fix it in the afternoon. So while I'm playing golf with my pastor, I mentioned the fact that I had this little problem with wiring, and he goes, well, when we get back to your house, let me take a look at it, because I worked my way through seminary doing electrical work. I said, you're kidding me. He goes, no, I can probably fix that for you. Well, we pull up into my driveway, and he turns and looks like that, and he goes, well, I see exactly what's wrong with it. I thought, my gosh, this guy's a miracle worker. I mean, we just pull into the driveway. He's still sitting in the car with the windows up. He can take one look at the wiring job and see what I messed up. I said, well, what did I mess up? He goes, you didn't put the bulbs in it. That is an honest story.
Did the fan work?
Don't make me come back there. Actually, the fan did work, and that's what I couldn't figure out. I didn't want to tell that part of it. That's how stupid I really am. Now, and with that said, not only am I the dumbest guy in this room, I'm the dumbest guy in my house. I have a daughter who is now 18, and I'm proud to say she is the president of her class at Ballard High School, which is a great achievement considering half of her gene pool. But Gracie has always been a lot smarter than I am. Now, we had a rule in our house as we were raising kids, and one of the rules is when you go to bed, you stay in bed. If there's something you should have done before you went to bed, well, you have to get it tomorrow, because we have a rule. When it's bedtime, it's bedtime. So Grace's room is right next door to the room that Terry and I share. And we put Gracie to bed with her brothers are in their room. And she hadn't much more gotten the room dim with the light going out. She goes, Dad, can I get a drink of water? No, Grace. Nice try. Stay in bed. So 3, 4, 5 minutes pass. I hear it again. Hey, Dad, can I get a drink of water? No, Grace. Go to sleep. You should have done that earlier if you really wanted a drink of water. So another 4 or 5 minutes passed. Dad, what? Dad, can I get a drink of water? No, Grace. And if I hear another word from you, I'm going to get up out of this bed and I'm going to tan your hide, young lady, because when it's lights out, it's lights out. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. Dad, what? When you come back here to spank me, will you bring a glass of water? Now, she's got a younger brother. His name is Gray, and Gray is now 16, and Gray has turned into a very good young golfer. And one of the things that I hope Gray gets a chance to do is I think he's going to be good enough that I think he can actually play college golf. And I've been working with him for a long time. I'm not a very good golfer, but I understand the sport pretty well. So he and I are out playing golf one night, and he's only about, I don't know, 8 or 10. He just started playing, but he was already pretty good at it. And so we're having one of those Norman Rockwell kind of moments. We're walking down the fairway, we've got our golf bags over our shoulders, and the sun's behind us, and our shadows are stretching up the fairway. And I'm just looking at my little white-haired son, and man, he's just beaming. And it's just one of those special moments. So we hit our shots, and we get to the fairway, and he and I are standing there, and he looks at me and goes, "Dad, I've been thinking about it." I said, "What's that, son?" He goes, "The father-son golf tournament's coming up next weekend." I said, "Yeah." "Oh, here we go. We're going to play in the father-son golf tournament." He goes, "And I'd really like to play in it." I said, "Well, me too. That'd be a lot of fun." He goes, "But I don't want you to play." I said, "You don't?" And he was his golf instructor was a guy named Barry Bonifield, who's down here at Crescent Hill. And I said, "Well, who do you want to play with you?" He goes, "I want Barry Bonifield to play with me." I said, "Well, Barry Bonifield's not your dad." He goes, "No, but he's a lot better at golf than you are." So one of my favorite things that I've had a chance to do with my son is I ran a golf tournament for a while over in at Valhalla, where we would invite in some pretty high-profile people to come in. And one year we invited J.B. Holmes to come in, who's from my hometown, or more properly stated, I'm from his hometown. And so we went to the airport, my son Gray and I. He was flying in, I think maybe from Arizona. He was flying in, so my son, we go pick him up, and Gray's about, I guess maybe 10, 11 at this time, and he's already playing high school golf. And so JB started playing high school golf when he was in the 3rd grade, and my son started playing high school golf in the 4th grade. So here's a great opportunity for Gray to learn from this guy. So we go to the airport, we pick up JB, he gets in our car, and Gray doesn't talk a lot, but as soon as JB got in the car, I mean, he was question after question after question. He's just talking up with JB Holmes. So we get to the hotel, we get JB checked in, and JB looks at my son and says, "Gray, do you want to come watch me play golf tomorrow?" And Gray kind of nervously looked up at me and then looked up at JB and said, "Well, Mr. Holmes, I can't. I've got school tomorrow." And JB goes, "Well, okay, if you change your mind, I'd like to see you come out." So we go walking back out to the car, and I said, "Gray, you don't want to go see JB play golf tomorrow?" He goes, "Well, Dad, I just feel like I need to be in school." And I said, "Well, son, I went 12 years of public school and never missed a day. And I can't tell you one day is different from the next. But I'll guarantee you this, if you go watch JB Holmes play golf tomorrow, it'll be a day you never forget." So reluctantly, he took his dad's advice, and he goes out to Valhalla with me to set up this golf tournament that JB's playing in. So we get things set up for the golf tournament. JB comes in, my uncle goes to pick him up, and JB comes over to me, he's getting ready to go out and play, and he goes, "Would it be okay if Gray caddies for me?" I said, "Seriously?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll let Gray caddy for me." So Gray's looking up, he's kind of giving me the old puppy dog thing. I said, "Man, go have fun." So Gray takes off. He spends the entire day at Valhalla caddying for J.B. Holmes. And when the tournament's over with, I'm standing at the porch. I'm welcoming all the guests in. And then out across the parking lot at Valhalla, I see this little yellow-haired boy wearing a baseball cap that he didn't leave the house with. And as the bill of that hat pops up, I see his eyes, and they are this big. And I said, "Gray, how did today go?" He looked at me and he goes, "Dad, that was the greatest day of my life." Isn't that a gift? To be able to give your kids something like that? And that's one of the cool things that I've had a chance to do by, as Chris mentioned, having a chance to be in the media for all these years. We've really had the opportunity to do a lot of cool things. I got to meet a lot of really interesting people through the years doing this. One of the guys, when I was doing television in Charleston, South Carolina, I got to know is a guy named Frank Howard. Anybody here remember Frank Howard? He was a football coach, football coach and athletic director at Clemson. Well, back in those days, and in that state, Clemson is kind of viewed as the hayseed university. Now, it's not, but that's kind of the way people view it down there. It's kind of where the country boys go to school. So Frank Howard was telling me this story once that as they were marketing, to use the modern day parlance, as they were marketing Clemson sports, somebody came up with the bright idea that they wanted to start a rowing team at Clemson. They thought it would kind of make them a little uppity, if you will. So Coach Howard said he didn't know anything about it. They said, "Well, I'll tell you what to do, Coach. We'll go to Harvard, and you can see what this crewing is all about." He was a little bit reluctant, but Frank Howard told me we got in the car, got an airplane, flew up there, And they got me out of the car, and he goes, I'm standing on the next to this river, and sure enough, 6 or 8 of these boys come out there in short pants and A shirts. They take this little skinny boat, set it in the water, and they jump in it, take off. I went back and sat in the car. And all the administrators that went with him kind of, where's Coach Howard? And they, well, he went to sit in the car. So his administrators walked up, tapped on the window, and said, hey, Coach, what's going on? He goes, I ain't giving anybody a scholarship for sitting on their butt going backwards. He also told a story, now, again, I don't know how many of these stories Frank told were true, but they were all very interesting. He said back in the 50s, they used to have an all-star football game in Texas. And every year, 2 different college coaches would serve as the honorary coaches of these high school football players. And of course, it's in Texas. Everybody wants to recruit Texas, right, Chris? So those coaches, everybody heads down and they recruit these boys out of Texas. So Frank was telling me that as part of the build-up for the big game, they would have a fishing tournament, and the coaches and some of the benefactors of the tournament of the football game would get together and they have a little fishing tournament. So he said that they headed out one day to do fishing. And Frank Howard and some of his guys were on one of these little old John boats, and then Coach Bear Bryant and some of his guys were in another boat, and they're out there fishing on the lake. Sure enough, the bear gets a bite. He stands straight up in his boat, and I don't know, Bear Bryant was a big man. And he's standing up in this boat, it starts to wobble, he starts to whine, it starts to wobble more. Next thing you know, Bear Bryant's in this lake with this infamous hound's tooth hat floating out beside him. So Frank said they all got a good laugh, but then they realized that those guys couldn't get the boat flipped up. So Frank said, we went over there to help them out. He said, we got over there and we fished 2 of them boys out, and the last guy coming out was Bear Bryant. He said, I reached over my arm and I said, come on up here, Coach, I'll pull you in, but you can't ever tell my fans back in Clemson I pulled you out of this water. Bear said, that's all right, you can't tell the fans back home that I can't walk on water. One of the other iconic guys we got to know when I was in Charleston, South Carolina for about 5 or 6 years. Then we went to Jacksonville, Florida. And while we're in Jacksonville, Florida, we covered Florida, Florida State. You need to get that? Okay. We covered Florida, Florida State, and Georgia. And so while I was down there, I got to know Vince Dooley pretty well. You guys remember Vince Dooley? I'm finishing covering the television station where I worked at was literally right across the street from the Gator Bowl. I could walk out of my office, take about 100 steps, and I am in the Gator Bowl. So the big game down there is the Georgia-Florida game, right? The world's largest outdoor cocktail party, they call it. And on this particular year that we're covering it, Florida has just fired Galen Hall as the head football coach. It was a huge controversy. So the football game's over. Georgia's absolutely smacked Florida around all day on the football field down there. So we go into the post-game press conference, and Coach Dooley comes in, and because there's so many of us media guys there, Coach Dooley stands up on a folding chair. And he's standing up there, you know, and he's taking questions. And finally, he and I make eye contact, and I say, Coach, I'd like to know what you think about Florida firing Galen Hall. And he looked at me and goes, now why would you ask me a question like that? And I said, well, because I think you're probably the most respected coach in the Southeastern Conference, and I think people would like to hear what your opinion is. He goes, well, when you put it like that, I'd be happy to answer. When I moved up to Nashville, we had a chance to cover a few sporting events here in my home state of Kentucky, and one of them was the Ohio Valley Conference basketball tournament. Now, as you guys know, in Tennessee, they're really good at football, but they typically aren't that great at basketball. So even though we had 2 teams we were covering, we certainly didn't expect them to win. So the plan was we're going to drive up, shoot the basketball game, do a live shot for Nashville television, then hightail it back to Tennessee. Well, as it would happen, the 2 teams that we covered both ended up winning, and they were going to play each other the next day. So we made no arrangements to stay in Lexington that night. And as you also may well know, at about 11 o'clock, they just roll up Lexington and put a bow around it. They are done. We had finished doing our live shots. We hadn't had anything to eat all day, so myself and my photographer, John Wilson, decided we were going to go out and find something to eat. We literally drove around for an hour, 90 minutes, trying to find some place open, and we couldn't. So we ended up, we're coming off of Interstate 64, and we noticed there's a Howard Johnson's Motor Lodge right there off the Broadway exit. And so I said, well, John, let's just pull in there. We'll get us some Hojos and, we'll just get a hotel room here, and then we'll get up the next morning and drive over to Rupp to cover the ball games. So John and I pull in. We go into the restaurant to eat. Now, the Howard Johnson's Motor Lodge complex is set up like this. You got the restaurant, then you got the Horseshoe Saloon like this, and then running off the L shape is the hotel rooms, the lodge. So John and I, now it's 2 o'clock in the morning by the time we've gotten there. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. We just finished our meal at the Howard Johnson's restaurant, so now we're going to go to the lodge to get a room. So we leave the restaurant, walk past the Horseshoe Saloon, and go into where the desk keeper is. So we go walking in there, and John Wilson looked like a guy that you would pull right off a Louis L'Amour novel. He always wore blue jeans, cowboy boots, a plaid shirt, a denim jacket, and he had a dark black mustache. And we go rolling in there, and John leans up on that counter, and that little college student is sitting behind the counter, and John gruffs out, "We need a room." Well, this guy behind the desk takes one look at me, sportscaster with blow-dried hair, and takes one look at this cowboy and says, "You boys need one bed or two?" I'll let you make up your own joke after that. Even though I'm admittedly the dumbest guy in this room, I am not the dumbest guy in the world. That may be this guy named Greg, who lives over in southern Indiana. Over in Kentucky. I'm going to read you from a email I got from him. I was still working at WHAS. Just finished the sportscast, and I walked back, and this is in the early days of emails. I don't even think we could do attachments in those days, but I go walking in, and I've just finished what I think is a pretty good sportscast. And I sit down and open up this email, and here's what it says. "Dear Mr. Gupton, you are an idiot." Now, I knew right off this probably wasn't going to be a good email. "Dear Mr. Gupton, you are an idiot. I rushed home from work tonight to find out who won the LIT game between DOS and PRP. But do I get that score from you? No. Instead, when I turn on the TV, you're running a story about some stupid, fat Indianapolis Colts fan. Who cares? How out of touch are you with the local sports scene? How can you call yourself a sports journalist when you don't say anything at all about a local high school basketball game? You and your TV station are a joke. I will never watch your TV sportscast again. Greg." Here's my reply. "Dear Greg, the DOS PRP game is tomorrow." I'll be happy to take any questions you guys. Yeah.
Was the person you followed Galen Hall Steve Spurrier?
Indirectly it was. There was a couple of other guys. Gary Darnell jumped in there for a little while, and then Steve Spurrier came in. And two things about Steve Spurrier. He has the nicest parents, or had the nicest parents you could ever imagine. His parents, his dad was a Methodist minister. And when we were in Florida, my son Grant was born, and my son Grant is now 23. He has Down syndrome, and he has had probably at this point 24, 25 operations. And Mr. and Miss Spurrier befriended Terry and me because we were 800 miles away from home and all this was going on, and they were fantastic to us. Now, their son was just a knucklehead, but they were fantastic. When you walked in a room with Steve Spurrier, he was the smartest guy in the room, and he would let you know it. I remember being at a practice early on in his tenure there at Florida, and Shane Matthews, who went on to play for the Chicago Bears, and he might have been all SEC his senior year. I don't remember for sure. But Steve hadn't played football in 20 years or so. And so they're trying to run this pass play, and Shane Matthews can't get it right. And Spurrier famously took that visor and threw it down, and Shane, let me show you how to do it. And Spurrier slid in under center. They snapped it to him. He slung it about 40 yards down the field right on stride. And he was probably, 40 years old at the time. Incredible athlete. Any other questions?
I've got one.
Okay, Chris.
You always had a great relationship with Denny Crum.
Mm-hmm.
As a journalist, how did you balance what might have been a friendship and having to report something that maybe they wouldn't like?
I think how I always tried to make determinations